On episode 246 of the Tennis Files podcast, you'll learn Mike Digby's top lessons learned from practicing with the best players on the planet. Hey there, this is Mirban Ranchad, your host. I hope you're having a great day, and I am definitely heavily at work these days, especially on Tennis Summit 2022, which starts on April 18th. I'm actually doing a live stream with my good friend Peter Freeman the day before to kick things off. And if you're interested in joining that, then go to tennisfilesummit.com or check the link in the show notes page. But today we have a fantastic interview with Mike Digby. Mike currently coaches at the Soto Tennis Academy in Spain. He was a former U.S. collegiate tennis player who graduated fairly recently, actually in 2019. And he worked as a full-time hitting partner with top players such as Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, Stefanos Tsitsipas, Rafael Nadal, Simona Halep, and many, many others, countless others. So it was really cool to talk to Mike about his experiences with both these players and their coaching staffs, what he's learned from them, as well as some of the funny experiences, both good and bad. So I think that'll be interesting for you, very interesting, in fact. And I had heard of Mike from actually a couple of my subscribers to the Tennis Files newsletter, as well as hearing him on a few podcasts as well, including the Functional Tennis podcast. So definitely I'm glad that I heard about Mike, because it's always really fun for me to hear about people who are playing at the highest level or who have played people who are at that level at some point. So I will get straight to the interview. And this is actually part one of my interview with Mike. So it was a fairly long chat. So we'll have part two next week. So without further ado, here is my interview with Mike Digby. Hey, everybody. It's an honor and a pleasure to have on Mike Digby onto the podcast. And I actually got some emails asking me to get Mike on, which was really cool to learn about, his journey. And then I listened to a couple podcasts about his background. And I love interviewing players who have played at the elite levels. And obviously, as you heard in the intro, Mike has been playing with, all the best players in the world. And now he's coaching at an elite level as well at a pretty young age, I'd say. So, Mike, welcome to the show, and thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
Yeah, of course, Mike. I just want to get started by asking you a fun question that I ask most of my guests, which is, how did you get your start playing tennis?
Oh yeah, great question. Well, I was very young. I think like a lot of players, I was probably 4 or 5. My dad actually played badminton to quite a high level. So I think, and then my mum played like tennis to a relatively high level, both in England. So I think naturally it kind of ran in the family with the whole idea of racket sports and all of that. So they took me down to the park, just to a tennis court, and from the word go, I actually was pretty good. I managed to get the ball over the net. So I think at that age, it's an achievement. So I think from there on in, I just loved every aspect of the sport, and kind of really, really enjoyed it from that age as well.
Very cool, Mike. And I know this is a tennis podcast, obviously, but I was curious when you said that your dad got to a high level at badminton. Like, I wonder, how does that, like, what's the highest levels of badminton, and what types of tournaments was he playing?
So yeah, I mean, he played to a relatively good level when he was younger, when he was maybe 20, 21. I wouldn't say like an international level, but he played like nationally, within like his university and everything. So he always had good hand-eye coordination. I think that's the biggest thing as any athlete that plays any racket sport, whether it's badminton, tennis, and so I think naturally from a younger age I kind of picked that up quite quickly, and I played a number of sports really, but tennis was the one that I seemed to just be better at. And I think when you're at that age, when you're good at something, you're going to enjoy it more anyway. So he played to a pretty good level, which allowed me to have some good hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then, it's really important to just to learn for, especially for tennis parents, of young kids and everything. Like, how did you, what types of training did you go through? Like starting from when like, I guess you mentioned at like, was it 5 or 7 that you started playing, a lot? And then, like
Yeah.
what types of like training environments did you have, at that age and after?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky. My parents were never pushy. I think they wanted me from the age of 5 or so all the way through to 11 or 12. I played football, I played cricket, I played rugby, I played tennis, and just to get a feel for all sports. And like I said, my parents were both pretty sporty, athletic, so they wanted an environment that was fun. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed, working in the sport is it's fun. I was put in an environment that didn't have much pressure. They just wanted me to play, to enjoy myself. And that shouldn't change when you get to 11 or 12. You should still have all the way through, whether you're a recreational player, all the way through to if you're playing an elite level in the professional game. It has to be fun. Like it has to be fun. So yeah, for me, the biggest reason that I think I continued playing all the way throughout my teenage years and still now, I enjoyed it. So I was put in the right environment to allow me to, stay in the sport.
I love that, Mike. Super important there. And like, what is it about tennis? What elements or characteristics about tennis is it that you really love and enjoy? Because I think sometimes, a lot of times we forget about that and then we get burned out. But so what is it for you about tennis that you love?
I think I'm a very competitive person, like a very competitive person. So I think it's that one-on-one battle that I love. Like I always say, whether I was a hitting partner or now I'm coaching, it's like a game of chess. You're always trying to get one move ahead of your opponent. And I always loved that element, even if at times when I was younger, I didn't realize I loved that element. I think now I'm a little bit older. I just love those battles, being able to try and figure opponents out. I love the athleticism of the sport. There's no hiding. There's no hiding. You either win a match because you played really well, or you've competed really well, or you lose a match because your opponent was better, or you just didn't. You weren't quite good enough on the day. So yeah, there's nowhere to hide in tennis, and I think I relish that. I love that element, and I think it's for me it's one of the best sports in the world, and maybe I'm being a little bit biased, but I think from a competitive standpoint, it's one of the best sports.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Mike. I did a very, very unscientific study in a sense where I emailed like 70 of the top college tennis coaches and wrote an article about it, like asking them, the top character traits of, the best student athlete tennis players, and their number one trait, overall was competitiveness. So,
100%.
That's a huge one. Yeah, for sure. And then, did you, after age 12 and such, did you go to any sort of, academies or anything like that? Or was it just like mainly private training, or how was that environment for you?
Yeah, so when I hit about 12, 13, I would say, I think I then realized that I was pretty good. Like I could play, and it almost to the point where I think I probably had to drop a couple of sports to maybe take tennis a little bit more seriously. So I ended up from about 12 or 13 just playing tennis, and I was part of. Near my hometown, they have like some like development centers and performance centers within like the LTA kind of system, and they have them scattered around the UK. And I kind of was part of that for a few years, and I would say I was a late developer. I wouldn't say I was one of the best juniors at all. Age 12, 13, 14 even. I think I probably started to develop a little later, and when I was maybe 16, 17, before I ended up going to college, I probably started to get a little bit better relatively quickly. So never really a part of many academies or anything like that. More private training, but we had a good base near where I live, which helped me out.
Excellent, Mike. And then in terms of like the progression through the rankings, I mean, obviously you, as we'll talk about, soon, you've been able to practice against so many of the top players in the world. So what, in terms of tournaments and rankings and such, like at what point did you reach, a high level in the rankings, and, just talk us through that like, experience for you?
Well, I'd honestly say I was a little bit different to most in the sense that I never really had a ranking that was much to brag about. I wouldn't say my level was anywhere near some of the best juniors in the country. Even into 15, 16, I probably shied away from competition a little bit, which I think I've seen in a lot of junior players now, being a young coach myself. So I think that's quite normal. So yeah, I was always, I was one of the best in my region, but I was never one of the best in the country at all. So I think that's almost in a way what I'm most proud of with what I've been able to achieve as a younger person, hitting partner coach. I think, and it's a good advocate for a lot of people out there, that you don't have to be this top 10, top 5 ranked national junior in order to achieve a lot in the sport. I think there's a lot more to achieve than just playing in the sport of tennis. So, I would say I started to get better the later I played going into my college years.
Very nice. Very nice. And then talk us through, the decision that, on which college to go to and such, and, the experience there.
Yeah. So I pretty much very quickly, around the ages of 16, 17, knew I wanted to go to college. It was a relatively new thing in the UK. I say new thing. It was new for me. Not a lot of people that I knew in my area went to college. There was maybe one or two that I knew, but I was told that it would be a really good decision for me, being a little bit of a late developer, giving me an extra 3-4 years to compete, and also combine that with getting a degree. So I looked at a lot of Division 1 schools, and I'd say I got quite a few Division 1 offers, but I always thought that, look, for me to get matches in, to play, to compete, to enjoy my time competing and try and, win as many matches as I possibly could, I was always considering Division 2 as well. And I ended up going to a Division 2 school, a good Division 2 school. And, it was an amazing 4 years. Like, it was really, really good for my development as a tennis player. I played, hundreds of matches over the 4 year singles and doubles combined. So, and ended up having, I think, maybe the third best win ratio or something in my team in history in college for the team that I played for. So it was a gamble between, look, I could play lots of matches, maybe at Division 2 level, or not as many matches at Division 1. So I always wanted to try and play more matches. And so I just thought Division 2 was a better option for me at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. And, we were talking about Premier League football, or, American soccer, I guess, or, when you're an American, you say soccer. And it's almost like, I guess, a player in the Premier League, playing in the championship so they can, play all the matches. But then you see them like play in the FA Cup against a Premier League team, and then they, they beat them, or they, they play at the high level. So, that's kind of pretty similar there. Cool. And then, what's really interesting is that I really want to get to is just like your journey and how you're able to play with, all of the greatest players here, like Federer, Tsitsipas, Nadal, Djokovic, Halep, who you've forged a nice relationship with and practice with consistently. So how did that all come about?
Yeah. So I was in my sophomore year in college, and a couple of years before I'd started to play German league. In Germany, they have a lot, like the Bundesliga. They have lots of divisions in Germany where I would go over and play that. So I started to play a little bit more there, and then over the summer I would always come back into Europe and try and compete a little bit for 3-4 months kind of summer break. And I'd finished German league, and I'd just got home, and I messaged my coach and said, look, can we do a few sessions? I wouldn't mind practicing a little bit this week because I'm back from Germany. And he said, oh, well, actually, look, there's this opportunity that's come up to be a hitting partner at Wimbledon. And I said, oh, right, yeah, cool, that'd be amazing. And he gave me the contact that then, I then went down to the Roehampton, the National Tennis Centre, and practiced with a couple of players so they could kind of gauge my level a little bit. And they liked me. They liked what I saw. And also being a lefty, I think helped a lot with the amount of lefties that are in the draw, especially with, your Nadals, Kvitova, those kind of players. You always need a lefty hitting partner around. So, I then ended up going to Wimbledon that year and practiced with Djokovic for the majority of the tournament, as well as abundance of other players, Batista Agut, John Isner, Naomi Osaka, and all these players. And I think that was almost, without me realizing it, halfway through college, my in to then do what I did over the following 3 years or so, and still continue to do now occasionally. So that's kind of how it all started, really.
And that's brilliant. And then I guess, I've always been curious about like the level required, to be a practice partner, because, I've the City Open is near me, pretty close by. And then I see some of the practice partners there. And, I think I've talked to a couple of them, and I mean, some of them said that you could even be like a pretty high level junior as long as you have like your strokes are consistent. But I was curious, from your perspective, what level is needed? Because I'm sure it's even a dream for a lot of people to be a practice partner at a local tournament and hit with the big guns. So what's the level do you think that's needed?
It's a really difficult question, because reality is every player requires something different. So, what someone like a Daniil Medvedev wants out of a hitting partner might be different to what Kvitova wants, to what Simona Halep wants. So I think that, look, obviously you have to be playing at a very, very high level to be able to compete with them and practice with them regularly. In the scheme of the tennis players that are out there, you have to be playing to a high level. And I think I made the role my own. And that sounds a little bit strange, but I always knew that I was never one of the best tennis players. I always knew that I was never the highest nationally ranked junior, but I always knew that I was good enough to compete and practice with these players. And I genuinely started it out as an amazing experience that I wanted to, practice, because I was still playing myself. So in my mind, when I went to Wimbledon for the first time, it was very much a case of, this is great 2 weeks to practice and have this incredible experience that could open up so many doors in the future. But I never knew how good I was in regards to being able to practice with someone like a Novak. But I think, like anything, when you settle, if you're a good player, then your level can shine through if you're good enough. And I managed to settle quite quickly. He made it pretty comfortable for me. And I think if you're a good, like you say, a good junior, then there's no reason why anyone that's got a relatively good level can practice with these guys and girls.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Mike. I've got a lot of follow-ups there. I guess the first one that I can remember is so your first was it your first practice was with Novak? Is that what you said?
Okay. Yeah. So it's a funny story there. I remember walking in and meeting everyone for the first time, everyone behind the practice desk. And they always used to give me like a list of the hits that I'd have that day. And I remember the first one being Djokovic. And
the first one.
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal. And it's funny because everyone thinks that must be the hardest one. And for some people maybe, and there's some players that I actually found a lot harder practice with for lots of different reasons. But yeah, but I think it's like anything. It's amazing what the power of connection can with an athlete. Like if you can connect with anyone and build up that relationship. I eventually, with quite a few players that I practiced with regularly, I didn't view them as this superstar. I viewed them as someone that I just got along with and I'm practicing with. So then it almost like, it detaches that emotion of, oh my God, I'm practicing with Djokovic, or oh my God, I'm practicing with Federer. It's more so a case of then, you know what, I'm actually just practicing with someone that's very good at tennis and it's their job. So I think that settled me quite quickly when I was able to build relationship with a lot of the players. I settled very quickly. So then actually I ended up improving because I was practicing with them so much. So yeah, it was a surreal first experience.
Very cool. Yeah, I've got a couple friends who've been on the podcast, Milan Krinitin and then Gibran Muhammad, and they both practice with Novak Djokovic as well. And it seemed like he was very friendly. And, I remember Gibran was like showing him his kids, and they were talking about like being fathers and things like that. So that was super cool. Yeah. Curious, could you take us through like the practice, like what types of drills and such that you all did during that first practice?
Yeah. So, first practice,
any of them if you can remember.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I always kind of break it down to 2 days. You have match day and then you have the practice day, especially when you're at the Grand Slams. So
yeah,
a match day is really basic, often just half an hour, 45 minutes, where you just run through everything, just like anyone would do to warm up for a match. No different at all in any way, shape or form. They might run like a particular pattern on the court that they're looking to implement in the match. So it might be that someone like a Djokovic knows that he's playing Nadal, so his backhand down the line is going to be particularly important that day to try and get it into Nadal's backhand. So he might just spend a little bit more time spending 10, 15 minutes just practicing the backhand down the line. But other than that, the majority of the prep is done obviously way before the tournament. But in regards to that specific match, the practice day is where they will then spend an hour and a half or so running through certain things that they want to try and implement on the court from a tactical standpoint. So again, if we use the Djokovic Nadal example, the idea of him really practicing transitioning, going hard into the Nadal's forehand to open up his backhand would be a pattern that I suspect he would use, and we've seen him use, many times when he's played Nadal. And so yeah, there's almost 2 separate days, which entail completely different practices in a way, but a lot of generic stuff that a lot of players that at any level would be practicing, anywhere in the world.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember listening yesterday to the Controllables podcast, and then you mentioned that you learned how to like hang back a bit more and like hit heavier, because I guess you like to take balls pretty early generally.
Yeah.
So that was cool to hear about. But I was wondering, I guess, how did your approach to being a practice partner change, if at all, like, from the first experience to later on? Did you make any adjustments moving forward?
In regards to my game, the way I played?
Well, it could be anything, actually. It's either mentally or how you played or anything like that.
Not so much. I think kind of along those lines, the one thing that I realized relatively quickly and that I really latched onto was actually learning more from the coaches than the actual hitting. I think at that period, I always had aspirations when I started my hitting to play professionally. I always wanted to give it a try and kind of just see how it went. But I think once the hitting started to kind of not take over, but I started to do a lot more of it, and I had some interest from lots of players. I was enjoying it so much that I felt like that I also could implement a lot of the stuff that the coaches were saying to me into players that I could coach and eventually try and maybe coach at that level, which is something that I still aspire to do. So I think the biggest thing that with my mindset that kind of switched over the years as a hitting partner was I got really almost obsessed in becoming a coach. And it was always something that I think I had in the back of my mind anyway. And when you start to get a little bit more friendly with a lot of the coaches on tour, they're more willing to help you out, give you some advice. And I learned so much by just observing what they did with the players that I was hitting with, that actually I built up quite a nice knowledge base for a younger coach at that level. So I was, very, very lucky to be able to spend some time with some top coaches who have coached on tour a lot. So that would be my biggest almost mindset shift from starting out as a hitting partner to now 3-4 years down the line.
Can you share maybe like the top 2 or 3 tactical based, tips that you've learned either from, all the practices or from, from the coaches of those players?
I think the one that sticks out for me is, and it's often neglected and sometimes misunderstood, is practice your strengths more than you practice your weaknesses. I think often we kind of always look to, and naturally as human beings, we look to the things that we're not so good at. So if, for example, in my game that my forehand's not so good, then I need to work on my forehand every day, all the time. Now, yes, obviously you do. There's elements of you have to practice your weaknesses. You want to try and get them better. But at the end of the day, Federer isn't going to be standing there and hitting millions of backhands, because ultimately he wants to be on his forehand as much as he can. So I think that was something as a young person, let alone a coach, that really hit me and changed, I guess, my mindset is just practice your strengths more, just implement those strengths as much as you can as a player, because that ultimately is what's going to win you matches. So that would probably be my big one. And then I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, just trying to become the best competitor that you can possibly be. I think when you become a top 100 player, a top 200 player, everyone can play tennis. Everyone can hit a forehand. Everyone can hit a backhand. Everyone's pretty athletic. Everyone can serve pretty well. Everyone can return pretty well. But the players that are ultra successful are the ones that can compete the best. And I think just reinforcing daily, like strong competitive, having a competitive environment and understanding what a competitor means, even for the top 100 players, that's what wins the matches. Look, I'm incredibly impressed with Nadal's forehand, with Federer's forehand, with Djokovic's returns, but I'm more impressed with their ability to do all of that as a competitor under pressure, under extreme pressure. And that's what makes them the great champions that they are.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Mike. And then in terms of, I know you touched upon this a bit, but I guess I'm trying to dig into like commonalities among, like the majority of the pros that you practice with, whether that's like, their routines or mentally or, strategically, like anything like that you can kind of share that, most of them have, or all of them. So
I think there's two things for me that stand out with all of the players that I've practiced with or been around. One of them is the amount of off-court work that they do, their preparation. It's more impressive for me, again, than on the court. They're spending 45 minutes to an hour before their match, whether that's doing prehab, whether that's stretching, whether that's rolling out, whether that's having a massage, physio, just preparing the body and also the mind to practice and compete. And again, that then doesn't finish once the practice done. They do the same thing. And again, the post rehab, everything that is entails to being a professional athlete, let alone a professional tennis player. So I think that, like if my one bit of advice to players, that are aspiring to be professional, is just really buy into all of the off-court work that is required. Because again, like I reiterate, once you become a certain level, the tennis, yes, as much as that is important to keep improving and improve the elements of your game from a technical standpoint, but the day-to-day habits that you set yourself and all of the recovery that's needed is vital. So they're all incredibly good at that and are so driven and value those areas of their game so much. And the other word that I use a lot with them all is they're relentless. They're just relentless. They're, whether that's when they're competing, as we all get to see on TV, but in their practices, it's just relentless, like just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And the best players, they all do the basics incredibly well, just to such a high level. And that might simply be, being able to open up the court with their forehand. It's as simple as that. It's really simple drills around, right, okay, when you get a short ball, go down the line and transition forward. But they do it with such minute detail to the point where the basics are done so well. And I think a lot of people think that they've got this, like, the coaches sprinkle some magic dust over their head, and all of a sudden they're doing these incredible things, and people are, oh my God, well, look, the coaches play a part in helping them improve, but they're all so relentlessly driven that they're on their own journey, and they're the ones that have got to where they are.
Love that, Mike. It's funny. I was listening to you in the car yesterday, pretty late at night, actually, after tennis. And, when I remember you saying a similar thing about, being willing to just do, what works tactically over and over again and having discipline to do that. And I was thinking, it's just, it really simplifies things. Like I remember playing last night and just over and over, trying to hit as many inside out forehands as possible to the opponent's backhand until I got a short ball, and then, going to the other side. And I did that over and over again. And then I thought and reflected about how important it is to just be willing to do that instead of like other fancy things, just doing the basics right, over and over. So it's really definitely hit home. No, I think just touching on that is again, I use the analogy, like, in order to build a house that doesn't fall over, the foundations have to be set first, i.e. the basics. If the basics are done really, really well, i.e. you've got a high first serve percentage, i.e. you're not missing ball 3, i.e. your return percentage is high, you're clear on the patterns you're looking to run in a match. If you can do all those things incredibly well, then the more creative aspects of your game can just be added as layers on top. And you can see that with the likes of Djokovic, Nadal and Federer. They have the basics, both on court and off court, nailed on. So then it allows them to be a little bit more creative in certain moments. So no need to ever overcomplicate things. Just get the basics done really, really well. Yeah, definitely. No, that's such a great point. Because when I was playing, like I saw a lot of other players, they seemed like they didn't have any set patterns. They were just like trying different shots all the time. And so I think, like you mentioned, just sticking to your strengths and, weaknesses wise, just, like I was thinking with my own game, like as long as I can have like a, consistent backhand that allows me to stay in the rally until I can, maybe change the pattern up to get it to my forehand again. That's really all I need. So, your tip to focus on your strengths more than your weaknesses is also obviously very important there. Aside from the things that you've learned, I also know that it's super fun for the audience to hear about like your experiences as far as like, who was fun, who wasn't. And obviously, as I mentioned, I heard about, maybe a certain Italian player that was a tough experience for you. But I guess let's go the other way first and then say, I think you mentioned that Novak Djokovic was a great experience, but like, were there any other players specifically that you don't mind naming, at least, that you really felt like you connected with and that they were really friendly and nice?
Yeah, so 2 spring to mind, mainly because I was probably on court the most with them. One would be Roger Federer, nice, and the other one would be Simona Halep. And that's purely because I spent a good amount of time with them in certain periods. I was with Federer for a good amount of time in London when the ATP finals was at the O2 in London. And then I've been with Halep kind of on and off at different events. I've practiced with her at different events over a series of a month or just under a year or so. So like I said earlier, I think when you are with someone more often, you just naturally build up a little bit more of a connection. So it's, those 2 would be the 2 that I would say that I've been around the most.
Got it. And then was there anyone else that maybe like, even though you hadn't, you hadn't practiced with them a lot, just like first interaction, like, oh, wow, this person's really funny or they're really friendly and nice or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's been a lot. Look, a lot of them are really nice. I mean, I've also practiced with Medvedev a lot. He's great person to be around. I was practiced with him at Wimbledon, again at the ATP finals, US Open. So so yeah, I've been around him a lot. So again, when you keep coming back, it's you recognize each other, you have conversations that aren't tennis related, and you can kind of, just view them more as someone you can have a chat to. I think the one that's just sprung to mind actually that I was with for about a week at Wimbledon was, because I think maybe it was his first Wimbledon, or definitely one of his first Wimbledons. He made the fourth round and actually ended up playing 4 lefties in a row, was Aliassime, Felix Aliassime.
Wow. Cool.
And I think, being a very similar age to Felix at the time, we spent the best part of a week, or the Monday to Saturday, with each other, warming up, practicing every day, because he ended up playing obviously 4 lefties. And he's a great, great guy, like really, really nice, very welcoming, very warm. Clearly, a very, very, very good tennis player, and he's got a very bright future. And but yeah, he always said hello. We always used to have some nice conversations on the court, off the court. And yeah, that week that we spent together at Wimbledon, I was hitting with him, was, that actually sticks out now I think about it. Really, really genuine person that, clearly loves the sport.
Yeah, I can, obviously I've never really been close to him or around him, but he seems like a really nice guy as well. Just watching him live and on TV. But can you tell us like any sort of, specifics on like interactions, like if there was any funny banter or a funny joke, or, like somebody played a prank on you or anything like that, like anything that you think that you found pretty funny and memorable with a player?
There's obviously certain things that I probably can't repeat. But
we'll blank it out. No kidding.
But I do remember, I'm sure it was 2018 when I was at Wimbledon, and it was the World Cup. And England were playing Sweden in the World Cup. Can't remember what stage it was. Maybe, was it the quarterfinal? I can't, it's so bad. I'm English and I can't remember. So bad. But And I remember watching that with Kyrgios in the players' lounge, and
oh wow,
and it was just hilarious because he obviously had no idea what was going on, and almost trying to tell a few. I was watching it with a few of like the English. There's a few other hitting partners, but then also a couple coaches, and he was as good of a guy Kyrgios is. I think he's a really nice guy. I think sometimes he's misunderstood. He was trying to tell us about how to play football, and it didn't go down well. An Aussie telling the English how to play football. So that one does stick out because he's a real character and good fun to be around.
Nice, very nice. Wow, yeah, I actually looked it up. So it was England, Sweden, quarterfinals.
Wow, that's it.
Yeah. Wow, I can't believe Maguire scored, and then our former Hotspur player Dele Alli scored. Oh, interesting.
There you go. Yeah, I was probably so focused on what Kyrgios was saying that I completely forgot that what the score was. But I do remember we won that match. That's what I do remember. Yeah,
that's a good one for the English. Very cool. And then okay, so let's go the other way in terms of like like maybe your toughest experience, or a couple of them, ones that didn't go well that you're comfortable mentioning here.
Yeah. Well, look, I've been very fortunate that I've had 95% of the time there's been some amazing experiences. I've played it on some amazing courts in some amazing cities. But the one for me that definitely was tough to take. Not from like a playing standpoint, more from the fact where it was with Fognini. And again, nothing against Fabio Fognini. I think he's an unbelievable tennis player. I think he puts smiles on so many people's faces when he's on the court, and I purposely go out of my way to watch him play. I think he's amazing. But whatever it was on that day, whether it was me just genuinely not being a good enough hitting partner, or whether he wasn't in the best of moods, he wasn't happy with me, and very quickly got rid of me on the practice court. And that was there's like 4 courts at Arangi Park at Wimbledon where that they're raised at the top, where a lot of like the seeded players would practice, both men and women. And I think we were on the 3rd court, and there was like Djokovic was practicing maybe, and then Federer, then Raonic, and then I was like in between with Fognini and me. And for whatever on that day and it was strange because I'd been doing a lot of hits and I'd been with Novak and all these players, and I was fine going on. And then I stepped on the court and was pretty nervous, like which was normal, but then also it wasn't normal because I'd had a good amount of experience at that time. And yeah, it just didn't start well. And yeah, one to, it's funny. I find it funny. I'm pretty open and honest with talking about it now, but definitely one that I look back and think, fuck yeah, I've definitely had some better experiences.
Dang. And I guess generally, what is it that makes you nervous? Well, so I know you mentioned like the connection. If you know the player and you have a connection, then you're not so nervous. But I mean, besides that, like, what are things that do make you nervous, or is it just like totally random?
Yeah, it depends, isn't it? I think every player brings things that you're wary of. So like if you're practicing with someone like a Halep, I know that I need to make lots of balls. I know I need to flatten the ball out because generally the women play a little bit flatter, lower trajectory over the net. But with Fognini, I know that he can be a little bit of a character, which is, if he's in a great mood, it's great. But if he's not, it's a little bit more challenging. So maybe I went into it a little bit more apprehensive than I normally would do. And brought out a few emotions that I was nervous and everything. But I think, you're just wary. I think you're wary because it's like, for me, yes, a lot of them are global icons. But I think sometimes what we forget is I'm helping them do their job. So if I'm not doing my job, then it doesn't help them do their job. So then naturally, like anyone in any industry, if you've got someone in that you've brought in that you want to help you and they're not, you're obviously not going to be in the best moods, or you're going to have words and you're going to speak to them. And I think, because it's a very emotional sport and it's very competitive and adrenaline runs high, naturally people are going to get, annoyed with each other and not quite like the way you do certain things. So it's pretty normal in the world of sport, I'd say.
Yeah, Mike, and I loved hearing your philosophy and approach to being a practice partner, which is to just help the player succeed. Like I think you mentioned there was maybe a player who was a practice partner who was just trying to like beat the pro, and then the pro was kind of getting like annoyed. It might have been Nadal, actually. I think you mentioned.
Yeah, but, I kind of remember that.
Yeah. So can you maybe name one more experience? Because I remember you mentioned that with Fognini, like you were like shanking, the first few balls, and it didn't, in 20 minutes or something like that. So maybe one other one with like maybe like a whatever highest ranked pro that you can remember where the practice just didn't go well, and walk us through like why that was.
So I'm racking my brain here because I'm sure I've had some, but I'm trying to remember over the years, but I've had ones. I remember one with Tsitsipas at the ATP finals. I wouldn't say it's not that it went poorly, but I wasn't playing well. That was just I didn't start well again. Wasn't playing well, and I could feel that. Moratoglu, who was on the court, could feel that, and so Stefanos could definitely feel it. And I think that he got a little bit frustrated, but then I kind of had a bit of a word with myself and I said, right, okay, Michael, like you got to step up now. You need to step up now. And I think I just snapped myself out of it, and then my level increased and I managed to turn it around. But I've been lucky, as much as I've had, worked very hard for the experiences that I've created for myself. I have been lucky in a sense that I think one of my strengths is being able to build connections and relationships. And I think that all of a sudden, if you can do that over the time and as a hitting partner, it eases the pressure off me. And then I think hopefully it allows the player to feel like that, look, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to beat you, because in reality, I'm not going to. So it's that whole idea of, look, I'm here to try and help you out. And then that's how I, had a few players ask me back, wanting to practice. And I truly believe it's not because I'm an unbelievable tennis player. I just think it's like anything. They felt comfortable with me on the court, and that then allowed them to feel like that they could practice freely.
Nice. And obviously, I mean, part of that is like just trying to figure out how you can help them. But is there any other ways that you like make them feel as comfortable as possible?
I think, again, with the players, I like your Haleps and not so much Federer, but mainly Halep, was being a lefty. We have certain patterns, again, that we like to do. A lot of general patterns that lefties, play. Like, they prefer doing certain things on the tennis court. Obviously, the serve's coming in a little bit different. So I would never say, but I would always also offer my advice as to, if someone's playing, Halep's playing Kvitova, what would she do? Or what, as a lefty, what do you think normally happens? Now, look, a lot of these players have played all these players before, and they don't need so much advice from the hitting partner unless I was actually their coach. But it's sometimes nice to have a little bit of a view from someone that's coming from outside of the team, a little bit to kind of, zoom out and go, right, okay, this is what I think, and this is how I play as a lefty. So you'd often try and help out with that. But again, for me, the biggest thing, keep it fun, keep it lighthearted. Try and make them smile, and they enjoy that. They genuinely, as serious as some of them look on the practice courts, they also just want to keep it nice and relaxed. And I think that's really important, especially when you're in and around and playing these big events.
Great stuff, Mike. And then in terms of friendliest team, just curious, because I know you mentioned that, it's really important that, almost more important, that the team is like nice and friendly, because obviously, the player can be in their own zone, for the tournament. So do you have like a friendliest team award you want to give out?
I know I keep saying her name, but again, it's only because I've spent, quite a number of practices, but I loved Halep's team. All of the team, I found them really friendly. Aliassime, again, him and his coach and his team were really, really friendly. So Naomi Osaka's team in the earlier days were really friendly as well. So there's a lot. There's a lot of teams that are pretty friendly, but then there's also ones that, not that they're not friendly, but they're working. they're working and they're looking to try and get a job done, and so you've got to respect that as well. So I'd say Simona Halep and Aliassime, their teams are good fun to be around and nice and friendly.
Great, Mike. And then in terms of your preparation, because I know that you're preparing, just as hard probably as professional tennis players would, taking care of your body and such. So what was your routine? I guess you can start from the night before or the morning, whichever you'd like to choose, like to prepare for these practice days.
I think, relatively similar to when I'm practicing myself. I think, get good warm up in. I think if I know the team, so later down the line, if I knew the team, I knew the player, I'd often go up to them in the morning, see how they're doing, and just have a general chat and see what's going on, what they wanted to do in the practice, anything in particular that they wanted from me, more so again with the teams that I knew pretty well. But yeah, just the big thing is, and I think that's the biggest thing to make you feel comfortable, especially at these big events, know what court you're practicing on, be there early, and expect quite a few people to watch, especially when you're with these players. And for me, if I was preempted all those things, and I was fine. I was absolutely fine. I remember there was one time where I was practicing with Halep on Arthur Ashe at the US Open, when she actually played, I warmed her up when she played Taylor Townsend in the second round, when she actually lost in 3, I think, Halep. And again, it was my first practice on Ashe that trip. And the best thing I did was get there half an hour early and just sit for 5-10 minutes, just taking in the atmosphere with all the media. And I just sat on in the stands for just 5 minutes, just to kind of take it all in. And then I went and did my warm up and everything. So then when I came out, it wasn't all of a sudden, oh my God, wow. Like it was amazing. It was an unbelievable experience. But I also felt like because I was there earlier, it didn't faze me as much. So I'd say preparation is more so with dealing with the environment more so than the actual physical warm up.
Got it, Mike. Yeah, that's very interesting and very important to note. Definitely, if, like, for example, like when I have a USTA match, if I like arrive there like a minute before, and it's definitely not as comfortable as if you get there early and you're able to do your dynamic warm up and such. And I guess speaking of which, like, how about yourself? Like, did you do like foam rolling and dynamic warm ups, and like what was your warm up like physically?
Yeah, I think I'd foam roll, I'd stretch, I'd do very similar stuff. A lot of the TheraBand stuff for half an hour or so beforehand. I only did this not because I was the hitting partner, but I used this a lot when I played. I after would always have an ice bath because a lot of the time when you play and you practice at these events, it's summer wherever. So I was in Australia this year, and it's obviously their summer, and then I come back here in Spain, and it's now coming up summer, so it's hot. Most of these places you go to are very very hot. So I always used to, as a player, have an ice bath after I played. So post match, post practice, I would always get in the ice bath because again, you could be practicing with 2 or 3 players. It's 3-4 hours you could be practicing a day. In Wimbledon gets hot, like it gets really hot, and US Open incredibly humid in New York. So that's what I normally used to do post practice.
Gotcha, Mike. And then kind of a random question, I guess, but when you mentioned like it being hot and such, like I was thinking about hydration, and you see a lot of players like drinking different sport drinks or mixes or whatnot. Do you have any intel on like what any of these sports drinks are? Or do you happen to catch any like brand names or anything like that or anything?
Not so much brand names, but they had a lot of water, but a lot of electrolytes. A lot of electrolytes to replenish the fluids lost. And I know some players put salt in their drink a little bit, because again, you sweat so much, you lose so much salt. So but yeah, every player has certain drinks that they have, and I know Andy Murray's a big one for it. He takes, again, the off-court bit with Andy is incredible. He's so detailed. I haven't really practiced with him much at all, but from what I've heard from a lot of coaches and players, that he's just incredibly detailed with everything. So he's one that hydration and fluid intake is really, really important.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of getting compensated, that was an interesting part to hear about as well. Like how did that work for you? And do you think it was like a decent level of compensation for what you were doing?
It's tough because I think some events are great. They pay you relatively good money, and it's right in the event itself pay you. Some will just pay expenses and you don't get a salary. And when you do it individually for the player, you obviously get you charge a certain rate. So it completely depends on the circumstance. But again, I was young when I started doing it, like 19 or so. So I was, if people were paying for my expenses and I got this experience to shadow some of the best coaches in the world on tour, to hit with some amazing players and open up so many doors in the tennis world, I'd be silly to turn it down, even if it was me doing it for free and I'm not charging a salary. Like it's one of the best things that I've done, and I will probably continue to say that from a coaching perspective. It's opened up so many doors for me. I wouldn't be at Soto Tennis Academy in the south of Spain doing what I do and coaching some top players without probably the hitting partner stuff. So yes, you don't get compensated enough probably, but I would, if I was giving it any advice, don't let that anyone stop them from doing it, because you can open up some serious doors in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like getting the best internship, the internship at the best company in the world, like Apple or Google or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. And you get exercise too. So interesting. And also like, just curious about like distinguishing that. So like, let's say if you're like practicing with a player, but it's like, so if the player is the one that says like, I want Mike, so then do you get paid by the player, or does it have to be like arranged outside of the tournament for you to get your own rate in?
Yeah. So yeah, if let's say a player gives you a call, emails, text, whatever, look, I want you for this block of tournaments, then it's normally the agent that deals with it. But, then you would obviously charge your fee individually, just like a coach, like a physio, whatever, fitness trainer, the same kind of thing. But if you're employed as such, or the tournament itself, hires you for the 2 weeks, for the week, whatever, then what they'll give you the players to practice with. But then a lot of players are superstitious. They have their certain routines that they want to stick by. And if you've given them a good practice on that day, they'll then ask for you back tomorrow, which is what happened a lot early on with me, because I went and did it for a few tournaments, and that's kind of what happened. So you have to almost arrange beforehand in order to get your own individual salary.
Got it, Mike. Got it. Very cool. Were there any particular pieces of advice, or like, a memorable quote or something like that you got from a player or a coach, during those practice sessions? And if so, what was it?
So many like that. It's really hard. I think I spent a lot of time with some really good coaches, and Darren Cahill, Moratoglu, Torben Belts, who's currently coaching Emma Raducanu. But I think the one thing that when I was younger, again, when I was still playing a little bit, the one message that kept coming across from a lot of players was just be patient. Just be patient, and at the time I was still thinking about wanting to try and play a little bit more after college. I eventually didn't, but just be really patient. Like, if you keep working hard, you keep doing the right things day in, day out, then you will have success at whatever level that is. And I think that then is the exact same message that I've got as a young coach. If I do the right things, I work hard, I try and be the best coach I can be day in, day out, then what I aspire to do will happen. It just takes time. It takes time. You need to build up your knowledge base. You need to understand the sport a little bit better. So, I think both from a playing standpoint and a coaching standpoint, patience is really, really important.
Yeah, 100%, Mike. And then, in terms of your journey to becoming actually, you know what? Before we go into that real quick, you mentioned that you wanted to, or you were considering like playing, afterwards, and I've heard you talk about, potentially like playing in tournaments and stuff to get go on tour, but like it's obviously very difficult. So can you walk us through like kind of your thought process on whether or not to pursue, a lifestyle on the ATP tour, and then how, what you were thinking in your decision?
Yeah. So I think, with my decision, I kind of in a way had it taken out of my hands. I did a lot of the hitting partner stuff over the times I had out in college, over the summers, and still went back to America, got my degree, played college tennis and did all that. And then because I'd done that during college, as soon as I graduated, I then did a lot, because obviously I didn't have any, I wasn't tied to doing my degree because that was completed and everything. So then I had a quite a long period where I was just being a hitting partner and helping the players out and everything. So yeah, from that point of view, it was fine. But I think like if that hadn't happened after college, then then yeah, I would have definitely wanted to play. But I think it was almost taken out of my hands because I was enjoying it so much and doing really well with it. And I knew that long term this would open up so many doors. And I wasn't good enough to the point where I could like walk on tour and win futures consistently and get myself up to a ranking where I could really push on. I knew that deep down. I knew that. And I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I didn't play, was because it opened up. And then I really enjoyed adding and talking to coaches on tour and then having coaching discussions around certain things that kind of ignited that passion that I have for now for coaching at an elite level. But in regards to advice for players, I think, look, the beauty nowadays for me, and I love the route, is we have college tennis. And I think we have a couple of players again at Soto Tennis Academy that were thinking about playing professionally, young, but we've had the coaches here, Dan Kiernan, who's the owner of the academy. He played at Louisiana State, so he has some really good connections, and he was also a top player himself. And I think we all stress, because a few of us have gone to college, how good of a route it is. And again, it goes back to the whole idea of being patient. If you can have 4 years playing at a very, very good level, if you're a very good player at a top Division 1 school, that's only going to aid your development from a personal point of view and also from a tennis point of view. So, that would be my kind of general thoughts around that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. And then, in terms of the transition, I guess, or actually, do you still, do you ever still are you still a practice partner at any tournaments, or have you kind of pretty much put that to the side?
I was a practice partner in Madrid, last year, when I hit with Berrettini, mainly with Berrettini and Alcaraz, and also with Kerber a little bit. So it's not something that I've put to the side. I think I enjoy doing it. And again, like I say, it opens up a lot of opportunities, for my personal development, and gives me some amazing experiences to learn from, again, some very good tennis players and also incredible coaches. But it's, I would say that the coaching role has probably come a little bit more, dominant in my career. And that is just a natural progression, from, being a hitting partner to ending up coaching. So that is just a natural progression that's happened. So yeah.
Well, Mike, and then how did you get into Soto Academy?
Yeah. So again, it's a Wimbledon story. So I was there, I think it was 2019. Yeah, 2019. And Evan Hoyt, who was at the academy and has been an integral part of the academy, he was playing doubles. He actually ended up making the quarterfinals of the mixed doubles. And at the time, Dan Kiernan, again, who's the academy director, he was coaching Evan. And I was leaving. I think it was the year where Halep won Wimbledon. And I was leaving, and Evan was there practicing on the indoor hard court at Wimbledon, because he was flying over to the US to play some challenges, and US or Canada. I can't remember which one, but he was definitely going away to play some challenges. And the practice desk manager said, "Look, would you mind sticking around and practicing with Evan? He's just looking for someone to play a set or a couple sets." And I said, yeah, sure, absolutely, no problem. And I ended up doing an hour and a half, 2 hours with Evan, played some sets, and obviously got to know Dan, had a good chat with Dan. And at the time, I actually hadn't heard of the academy, but Dan sold it incredibly well, and rightly so, because it's an incredible place. And that kind of how that started. And then I'd say maybe 3-4 months down the line, I saw that a kind of a position came up to travel with some of the pros at the academy and kind of be, in and around as traveling coach / hitting partner. And I always realized, living in England, in Norwich especially, it wasn't full of opportunities for me. And I did want to try and have a base where I could develop as a coach, develop as a person, and be able to live in an amazing place like the south of Spain, Soto Grande. And for me at the time, it was perfect because it gave me an opportunity to travel with some very good players that were playing on the ATP tour and ITF kind of futures tour, and also gave me a chance to learn from some incredible coaches at the academy. So that's kind of how that came about, and I've been here now for a couple of years, and I've had some incredible opportunities from the academy itself. Dan is, not just a great academy director, but a brilliant person, and has allowed me to have some really, really good opportunities and helped me out a lot, along with a lot of the coaches. Nigel Beavers to be one, Carl Mays, who's the ex-coach to Kim Kleisters, is now our performance director. A lot of coaches that have helped me out and helped my knowledge base since I've been here.
Excellent, Mike. And so, what are some of the ways that you've incorporated, what you've learned, throughout your tennis experiences and playing with, the players and coaches? How have you integrated that into your coaching philosophy?
So I think for me, again, I reiterate the point around keeping things simple, doing the basics really, really well. I've got 3 or 4 years experience being around these players and these coaches and understanding their day-to-day habits and understanding what they do well. So I can almost pick out certain players that I've worked with and implement it. So I'm coaching a girl at the moment that's around 150, 200 ITF. She's 16, she's tall. And I always kind of refer to her as like, she's got some Ash Barty traits and she's got some Sabalenka traits. And I've managed to be on court with Sabalenka a little bit, and I've been around Ash Barty quite a bit. So I think being able to implement what they do well into her game, I've got the experience a little bit over the last 3-4 years on talking to their coaches, understanding what they do well. And I can, again, rely on those coaches for information as to how they would go about certain things and try and implement that. So the biggest thing for me that I value the most is the experiences that I've had around the coaches, like I've said. That's allowed me to try and start to develop some philosophies. Look, I'm 24 years old, so I'm very young. So I wouldn't say that my philosophies are, absolutely set in stone, but it's given me a little bit of a head start to kind of be around all these coaches and understand what kind of philosophies that work for them and try and tailor that towards me.
Brilliant stuff. And curious, you mentioned, traits for Ash Barty and other players. Like what are you trying to implement in that particular student's game? And, what are the traits that you think that she has from Barty and I think Sabalenka? Yeah.
So without going into loads of detail, obviously, just because I don't want to give too much away. If people are watching, then they're going to eventually play her. But no, she slices very well. We're trying to implement her slice into her game. And there's certain patterns on the court that we try and put in to set up the forehand. She's very powerful, the player that I coach. So being able to use the slice in order to set up the forehand, again, being able to be really clear on her serve and ball 3 patterns. So if she's serving wide on the juice court, where is she going with her forehand on ball 3? Again, same thing on the return. What is she looking to do off the return? Is she maybe looking to use the slice to get the ball low to then again get on the forehand? So just being able to kind of like use Ash Barty as a model to then implement her things, because obviously we know how good Ash Barty's slice is, and how well she then sets up the forehand. Again, the player I coach also likes to volley. She comes forward. She's aggressive mindset, looking to be proactive. So, and again, it's very similar to Ash. So then I will often watch a lot of Ash's videos and footage on YouTube and watch how she plays, and then kind of go, actually, you know what, like, you're good at that. So how can we implement that into your game, and how can we use that then as a strength to practice? To add more bits to your game.
Brilliant, Mike. And then I guess it sounds, because my question is going to be what level of players do you coach, I guess? I mean, it sounds obviously with this particular girl that she's at a very high level, but do you coach like mainly high performance, top ranked players, or do you coach like a wider variety?
So yeah, at the academy we have players that are 5 years old, just starting out playing, all the way up to our pros, in their like mid-20s, early 20s. So I am a big believer, and I think I've learned, not the hard way, but I think it's been a good eye opener for me that actually coaching everyone in the first year or two. At the time, it was frustrating because I really wanted to work with the higher end, but actually I learned so much because you develop communication skills, you develop empathy, you develop how to adapt to different players and different groups. So I really value that. But now I've probably started to develop a little bit more of philosophy and kind of made certain roles my own. I now mainly coach the more performance players, and into the pro game, which is what I aspire to do. So I think I've that I haven't started out completely like that, and it's not a case of I only coach them. I help anyone. I think it's a good trait as a coach to help anyone that steps on the tennis court. But I think I would say that I've kind of migrated into that role of being more of that performance coach, especially over the last 6 to 8 months.
Got it. And do you coach by any chance any like club level players, or in other words, like adults who are like 3.5s to 4.5s?
I have done in the past, yeah. When I first started out to kind of develop some skills, I have done, yeah. And I've learned just as much from them as I have being on court with Roger Federer. It's just a different type of learning. So I value those moments just as much.
Gotcha, Mike. Yeah, I just asked that because most of our audience is in that range, the 3.0 to 4.5, I think. So I guess my next question is what are some of the biggest mistakes that amateur players, either you can pull from the adult club level or juniors? What are the biggest mistakes that they make? And maybe give us like 3 of them or so, and they can be, again, technical, tactical, mental, physical, anything from those realms.
I think the big one, and this is something that I've learned, and I learned the hard way as a player, is the word unforced error. Like the game, yeah. When you're a club level player or a junior, you often lose matches because you just leak way too many errors. And again, that goes back to the idea of just being really, really good at the basics. Now, and I always say this, and one of the coaches at the academy always used to say to me that it's not a tactic to get the ball in the court, it's a rule. The rule is you have to get the ball between the white lines in order to give yourself a chance of winning the point. It's not a tactic. You don't decide whether or not you do it every now and again. So one of my biggest bits of advice is just try and reduce the unforced error count. Try and be as consistent as you can. And when I say consistent, that means consistent to the game style you want to play. So if I'm a club level player and I love my forehand and I want to try and be a bit more aggressive because I'm a bit taller, I'm strong, then be really consistent at being able to hunt the forehand down. Or if I'm maybe a little bit smaller and I'm a bit more scrappy and I like to stay behind the baseline, be really consistent at hitting with really good depth to keep your opponent from attacking you. So that would be my first one. I think the other one, which I also would think is something that isn't practiced enough, and that is the serve and return. And I think at the end of the day, if you can't serve and return, you can't play tennis because you can't start the point off. And I think it's something, again, that isn't practiced. We all step on the tennis court and the first thing we do is hit 50, 60, 70, 80 balls up and down the middle. Yet in a match, you would never hit 50, 60, 70, 80 balls up and down the middle. So I've often with some of the club level players that I coached before is we might do literally 2 minutes, 1 minute of hitting balls, and then we might literally go straight into 20 minutes of serving. And I even, as a player that I coach at the moment, where we sometimes haven't even hit any balls to warm up after the physical warm up, he's gone straight into implementing some volley patterns, serve and volley patterns. So I think that will be my other one. Put a lot of emphasis on trying to develop the serve and return, because if you get really good at being an effective server and returner, you're going to be very, very hard to beat.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, especially the returns. I think that's really not practiced much. But yeah, the serve as well, obviously, arguably the most important shot in the game. And as far as like the serve, do you have any tips for us? Kind of a similar question, which is like maybe the top one or two, things that players need to improve upon the most on their serve technique.
Yeah. So for me, there's two anchors. There's two things that I always look at when I'm trying to develop a serve. And again, I'm young, so I'm still learning daily on the technical aspects. It's the most technical shot, the serve, because it's the one that could go wrong the most, because there's so many biomechanical aspects that you have to consider. But the two things that I look for is the ball toss and then also the hip drive. So with the ball toss, are they releasing the ball at eye height? Because if you release it before eye height, the ball is going to go too far out front. If you release it above eye height, you're going to end up throwing the ball behind you. So if you can really focus on releasing the ball at eye height, you're going to have a ball toss which is pretty consistent. And then with the hip drive, how well do they get their back hip loaded to then really fire the back hip to then finish over the front hip, again, to really create that vertical drive. So those are the two things that I would look out for straight away. Now, obviously, there's lots of different aspects of the serve from a technical point of view, which is vital to be a good server. But from a club level point of view, can you really feel like that you load your back hip on the serve to create the vertical drive? And can you release the ball at eye height?
Love it. Yeah, thanks. Those are really important tips that I think everybody will benefit from. Really appreciate that. And then is there anything in your coaching philosophy? I know I asked a similar question about like your, being a practice partner and your philosophy there, but anything in your coaching philosophy or approach as well that you've changed throughout the years that, and I know you're young, but anything that you've changed that maybe other coaches might want to look out for as well?
I think the one thing that I've learned the hard way is just say less at times. Just say less. I think coaches are often, and again, I'm completely, guilty of this, but often just talking too much. There's certain things that actually, if we give players a chance, they figure out. So if they're missing the ball when they're looking to transition down the line, I think we're almost instantly in there to kind of like do it. Well, actually, just give them a chance. Give them 3-4 more, see if they figure it out. Because often what I've found over the last couple of years is actually, you know what, they'll end up coming to you going, those the first few, I felt like I let the ball drop too much. I didn't take it, at the peak. Whereas the few after I figured that out, I took it earlier and got my contact point out in front, and I did a lot better. And so I haven't had to say anything. I've just observed that and we're ready to say something if needed. But I think we've got as coaches, we often are guilty of talking way too much. And players are smart. Players are normally pretty smart and they're switched on.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't remember this is Emma Doyle or Jonathan Stokey, who I interviewed, but they mentioned like the approach of just, asking the player rather than giving them all these directives, like, because then you improve like their ability to problem solve, which is what they're going to need anyway,
exactly.
When they're not with the coach or not allowed to, consult with the coach.
I think it's
brilliant.
Independence. You have to, and this is in all levels of the game. I think you have to teach independence. Like, again, it goes back to my idea around tennis being like a game of chess. Like, no one else is making the move for you. You've got to be able to have lots of different tools in your toolbox, but then also be able to pick the right tool for the right job. And I think that's the one of the hardest things as a tennis player, to be able to understand what you need to do and when. But that is often taught through players figuring it out from themselves and learning from their own mistakes.
Right. And how do you adjust? I mean, you mentioned like, especially in the beginning, having to coach like all these different levels. But how do you adjust? Because, one of the most important things that I've heard from many coaches, and I think you mentioned too, is just like the ability to adapt to like who you're coaching rather than just having like one set, plan or way to go about things for like every single player that you have, who are all have different needs. So what's a tip to being able to adapt to depending on which player you're coaching?
Yeah, so a couple things, and I think one feeds into which I believe one of my key strengths, and that's again building relationships and connection with the player. You need to know your player. You need to know what they're good at. You need to know what they're not so good at. You need to know what they like. You need to know how they like to be communicated to. You need to just understand what the player needs. And I think if you do, then naturally, if you can connect and build those relationships, you're going to adapt your vocabulary that you use. You're going to understand what they like to hear, what they don't like to hear, when they like to be spoken to, when they don't. I know with some players that if they are a little bit peed off, that I'm going to leave them for a few minutes. I know, but then with other players, I know that I'm still okay to talk to them because they're still receiving information. So that would be my one big one is build that relationship connection and understand what the player needs. And then my other one would be more so around know your sport. Just get really good at knowing the sport, understand what the sport entails. And this is probably more so coming at from more of a performance level. But I know I'm much better knowledgeable now at what a 16-year-old that's 150 ITF needs with that particular game style, because I've watched a lot of tennis. I think coaches, and again, I'm absolutely guilty being a young coach, is I think we often deliver lots of information without actually watching any tennis. Like Dan Evans watches so much tennis, like so much tennis. And that's almost his coach. YouTube is a coach. Go on. And I think as coaches, and I'm passionate about the sport. I love the game. So I naturally watch anyway. But if I'm unsure on maybe, what does Ash Barty like to do when she's wide on her backhand? And I know that she slices well. I know that my player slices well. I'm going to watch 20 minutes footage of Ash Barty getting out wide to her backhand and look at what she does. So I think that then helps adapt your ability to coach different players, because you've then seen it, in video footage. And again, this is tailored a little bit more to the performance-based side of it. So yeah, know the personality and know the person, and then know the sport.
Brilliant. Awesome. Great stuff, Mike. And just kind of to shift the topic slightly, but I was wondering if you could give us any recovery tips for, whether it's competitive juniors or, competitive adult players, like maybe like a basic routine that they should follow, right after they practice or right after they play a match. That would be helpful.
Yeah. So I think foam roll, like as soon as you finish your practice or your match, like get the foam roller out, try and loosen off the muscles. Make sure you stretch. Stretching is so important. Taking care of the body is vital. And there's certain areas and certain players which might be a little bit weaker. So it might be that some players naturally their left calf gets really tight or whatever it might be. So just really working on specific areas that that you're developing from a physical standpoint a little bit more. And then food is vital. Like getting the right amount of food in the body, and the right food in the body is so important. Making sure that you've recovered from a physical standpoint, but then also with the food. And the biggest thing for me, which isn't done enough as tennis players, is reflect. Reflect. So I get with the player that I coach at the moment, and with a lot of the players that I've been involved with, is at the end of the day, I'll get them to send me through a voice note or a little summary of how they felt their day went, whether that's during a tournament, whether that's during a practice of, right, what did you do well today? What could you have done a little bit better? And what's the focus for tomorrow? Just your ability to reflect on those days, because sometimes days roll into weeks, roll into months, where actually we haven't realized that we're not really going anywhere because we haven't reflected on the areas that maybe we need to work on a little bit more. So, so I would say physical recovery, food, and reflect.
Got it. Those are fantastic, Mike. Really appreciate that. And in terms of, I guess your, future projects or anything like that, goals, like, I'm curious what those might be.
Yeah, it's a great question. Great question for a young person. Look, I have aspirations to be the best possible coach I can be, to be the best person I can be, and I think that's in reality, from my own career standpoint, if I can work just as hard as all of the players I coach to make them as good as possible. And that's not just as a tennis player, as a person as well. That's something at the academy we're really big on, is making them better people. So from that standpoint, that's a big one for me, just developing, just constantly learning and developing. I speak to a lot of senior coaches that are 50, 60 years old, and they're always saying, I'm still learning now, because the game always evolves. So just being able to learn is a big one. My aspirations from a career standpoint, I aspire to try and coach at a professional level. I think that's something that I've always wanted to do since I've started coaching, and something that I hold highly, and that's what I strive to do. Every player is vitally important to my development, and I thank all the players that I've coached as much as I thank all the coaches that have taught me. But I'd say my big aspiration would be to coach on the tour.
Oh, wait, I know you're on the right track, and with all the connections you've forged, knowledge you're accumulating, I'm sure that'll happen for you, Mike. And then in terms of books, I'm not sure how voracious of a reader you are, but I was wondering if you could, name 3 books that you would give a friend to help them improve their tennis game.
Great question. I have read quite a few books. So the ones that I would probably recommend would be Winning Ugly by Brad Gilbert. I think, again, we go down the competitor route, like matches, and I know I'm going more performance level here, but matches are won through being an unbelievably good competitor. When we say the name Rafa Nadal, a lot of people say warrior, like the bull, like fighter. Nothing to do with his tennis. To do with him. Him is this raw competitor. Winning Ugly by Brad Gilbert would be one. I actually think Nadal's autobiography is a really good one to read. He, as any tennis player, as a recreational tennis player, as a performance player, I think it's really, really a really interesting read, not because you learn so much about Nadal's story, but you learn about him as a person and how potentially you could implement those certain things as a player. And look, those would be the 2 main ones from a tennis standpoint. But I think that any autobiographies of any professional athletes, I think, are so vital, because they all deliver very similar messages. I've read Steven Gerrard's autobiography. Oh, yeah. I've read Johnny Wilkinson, the rugby player. I've read Eddie Hall, the weightlifter, or the world's strongest man. World's strongest man.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah,
got it.
Again, completely different background to Rafa Nadal, but the core of the message around the hard work, the dedication, the discipline, still stands. So those would be some recommendations.
Very nice. Yeah, Steven Gerrard, a great Liverpool player and current Aston Villa manager here. Just for those of you who might not know, not in football, I guess, if you're not in football, but brilliant. And I guess, let's see, I was trying to think, in terms of like, next steps, like for players, like I guess in terms of like, if they want to be more consistent, because you mentioned like being more consistent, being a warrior. Like, I know it's, obviously we want to tell ourselves that we need to do these things, but how do you actually develop consistency? How do you develop becoming, a warrior so that you can actually really be a great competitor?
I think my one big thing, and I'll go down the avenue of more of like the mental side of the game, because I think that's something that again isn't talked about enough and worked on enough. I think a lot of it is around the idea of accepting these emotions and tolerating the emotions that you feel during a match, and being able to understand and normalize frustration, anger, happiness, sadness, like all of these emotions that happen in a roller coaster in a match at any level. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're a 6-year-old playing a little tournament in the park or you're Rafa Nadal playing in the final of the French Open. You're all going to experience these uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that come on board. So for me to be able to develop the mental toughness aspect, and it goes along the lines of being able to manage and accept these emotions that come on board, and then being able to then still perform feeling angry, frustrated, happy, sad, or whatever. And the best tennis players in the world are able to do that under pressure. So being able to understand which emotion you're feeling and allow that to be there, then if we're doing that, then we're most likely in the present moment. And tennis is played in the present moment. You have to be in the present moment in order to be able to be constantly thinking about what you're doing. So just having a good awareness of your thoughts and feelings, for me, develops mental toughness.
Brilliant. Love that. Thanks, Mike. And then where can people go to learn more about you, whether that's, socials or a website or anything like that?
Yeah. So my social media, I'm pretty active on Instagram. It's a big one. I often post where I'm at, what I'm doing, where I am in the world, who I'm coaching. So I think that's a nice one to follow if people are interested. And then on Soto Tennis Academy's Instagram as well, we often have lots of coaching videos by myself and other coaches at the academy, which is lots and lots of tips on all aspects of the game. Technical, tactical, physical, mental, and I'm often on their page talking about certain things, as well as some other brilliant coaches that we have at the academy. So I would say for my journey, my Instagram, and for who I work for and who I represent is in Soto Tennis Academy, their Instagram pages.
Great. And then we're going to have the links to, the books, as well as, Soto Tennis Academy and you on the website or the show notes page. But just for the listeners to hear it in audio form, what's your handle on Instagram? It's
at Mike Digby with 2 Y's.
Got it. Okay, good. Yeah, that's what I remember. Excellent. Great stuff, Mike. Well, I really enjoy this conversation. Really appreciate your time, and just want to ask you one last question, which is, what is one key tip that you can give our audience to help them improve their tennis games?
Great question. $1 million question. Bit cliche, but work hard. Any level. Doesn't matter whether you're a beginner, doesn't matter whether you're a pro. Just keep working hard, keep trying to get better, and you will. Tennis is a simple sport if you do the basics really well. And I think just keep working hard, keep looking to improve, and never lose the enjoyment in the game.
Got it. Love that, Mike. And any, last comments or anything that, I might have missed that you want to just bring up today?
No, I think, look, my one big thing is I enjoy telling my journey. I think everyone's got their own journey in every aspect of whatever they're doing in their lives. And I think my one big thing that I've said on a lot of the podcasts that I've been on is don't think that if you're not this amazing tennis player, that you can't achieve big things in the sport. I think that's the often misconception with younger players is, oh, I'm not very good, so I'm just going to stop playing tennis. I'm going to stop. No, like the sport has so much to offer, whether that's a hitting partner, whether that's coaching, whether that's commentating, whether that's being a physio for a player, whether it's working in grassroots aspects of the sport and having a massive impact on the younger generation. I think, the sport has so much to offer. And I think my big bit of advice to all younger players is like, just keep working hard and keep, having fun and enjoying the sport. Because yes, I haven't been a professional tennis player, but I've had some incredible opportunities to practice with some incredible tennis players and coach some, elite level players in a young career. So hopefully that can help other players that are in the same boat.
Yeah, no, I love that. So lifelong sport. There's not many that you can keep playing until you're, like in your 90s, which I've seen many of them play. And just, all the connections, like I've got, jobs through tennis, and I'm continuing to enjoying it through the podcast. It's speaking with great people like yourself. So, many opportunities, many ways to keep enjoying the sport. It's a great one. So definitely want to keep everybody involved who's listening. So with that, Mike, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. Really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing your really cool experiences, both, as a player and, as a coach. So thanks for coming on, and looking forward to connecting again soon.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and it's been good fun.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. All right. I really hope that you enjoyed my interview with Mike Digby. And Mike, thanks for coming on to the show. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And of course, as I mentioned, part 2 will be coming out next week. So just click on to the next episode if you're listening to this over 1 week from when this show right here came out. If that made sense, I hope it did. But in any case, thank you very much for listening. And you can find all the links that we mentioned today on the show notes page. And if you enjoyed this episode, and if you enjoy the podcast, then would appreciate it if you would leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcasts or your favorite app that you use to listen to the show. Apple Podcasts, their URL is tennisfiles.com/Apple Podcasts. Well, at least the URL for my show, not their URL, but it will redirect to their site. I also do want to leave you with a quote, as I often do at the end of the show, and this one is by Wayne Gretzky, a hockey legend, and Wayne said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Really love that one. And lastly, definitely want to have you join in on Tennis Summit 2022, which includes over 40 of the top tennis coaches on the planet who give you on-court lessons, masterclass presentations, and live Q&As. Over 40 of them with coaches such as Paul Annacone, Rick Macy, Peter Freeman, Will Hamilton, Gigi Fernandez, Dr. Mark Kovacs, Ryan Reedy, and many, many other amazing coaches. And you can get your free ticket to watch all of these sessions for free at tennisfilesummit.com. And again, check the show notes for that link if you just want to head there and click without having to type anything in your, internet browser or whatever you call those of choice. Obviously, I know what they're called, but, just joking around. I am definitely overworked right now, I think, but, it's all in good fun, just working on the summit, prepping for it. So I hope to see you there, and I'll also see you on next week's episode. So you have a great one. Stay safe, play a lot of tennis, and keep improving your tennis game. This is Mehrbon Aranshad signing out.